Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Mastering Dungeons. I am your host, Sean Merwin, and I have with me my co-host, Teos Abadia.
Hey!
But now you get twice the knowledge, twice the expertise this week, because we have on with us GM Tim and Marcelo De Velazquez, two DMs and two adventure designers who are going to help us break down and give a final look at not just Icewind Dale, Ram of the Frost Maiden, but where it fits among the other D&D hardback adventures. So, Tim, Marcelo, thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to give our listeners a little introduction into your stuff? Marcelo, why don't you start?
Well, my name's Marcelo De Velazquez. I'm a DM from Omaha, Nebraska. Have been a big fan of D&D since my later childhood, and so I've had an opportunity to play throughout many different editions, and those experiences have culminated into my diving into 5th edition here a couple of years ago, which has rekindled my love for the game. And after that, I decided to take a dive and get into adventure design. And then a couple of mentors of mine had recommended I start doing conventions where I had of course, the opportunity to eventually run into Sean Merwin and many others that have kind of helped me and inspired me to get where I'm at right now.
And when I hear people talk about great DMs, they always mention Marcelo if he's on that circuit. And I know you've written some CCC adventures as well, so people can check those out on DM's Guild. Thank you for joining us. And GM Tim, why don't you give us the rundown?
Hi. Yeah, I was actually going to say I'm kind of fanboying right now because I'm like Sean Merwin, Marcelo, and Teos is like, there's a little bit of me that's just kind of squealing right now. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm the GM Tim. I'm from Vancouver up in Canada. And I run games as a job. It's kind of awesome. And I got to start writing the last couple of years. My adventures started off rocky and got better as I go. so it's neat to like have people kind of coach you and mentor you, and so now that's what I want to try and do with others who are like, I want to write. It's like, great, try this. And so, yeah.
You wrote one of the season 10 adventures, correct?
Did. I wrote right in the middle, season 10-3. I'm in the middle of a pentalogy with a whole bunch of other amazing writers. It was what a great experience that was. Oh God, that was so much fun. And writing that story was just like, yeah, it was my first kind of like attempt at a horror, kind of like dark, kind of like make them scared game, and I think I did pretty good.
Everything I've heard has been positive coming down the pipe from the players, so that's great.
Nice.
I haven't had a chance to look at the final version, but I was one of the playtest reviewers, and I really loved what you did with that. So I'm excited to see the final form.
Yeah, I had somebody made a meme about it, which like just made me giggle until it was just ridiculous. I had a goofy smile on my face for weeks after that one. Yeah. Thanks.
You've been memeified.
Yeah.
Super awesome having you both on. Thank you for helping us with this, because we were looking at how one tries to sum up rhyme after such an in-depth review, and we said, it would be really cool if we had different, fresh takes. And so we'll get into that after the news, and I'm excited to do so.
So we'll just give a couple bits of news. As we started recording, news broke. There is an enigmatic post from Wizards of the Coast on Twitter where a Ouija board spells out "The Mist Beckons." So it looks like maybe something Ravenlofty coming soon, or at least will be announced soon.
It's clearly Spelljammer.
Yes.
I'm excited about that.
The mist being the clouds above which these spelljammers. Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
Sure.
Speaking of some good content, Arcadia issue 2 is out, and if you have not checked that out yet, that is the new, hopefully, not predecessor. What's the word that comes after the
Successor?
Sequel?
There you go. Thank you. You can tell Marcel is a writer.
Our quality has
Exactly.
already improved on this show.
The spiritual successor to Dungeon and Dragon magazine, Arcadia, is from MCDM and edited by our friend James Introcaso. And it has the following articles. It has Subclasses of the Seasons by Joshua Mendenhall, which are season-themed spellcaster subclasses. So you get a new Wizard Order of Hibernation, a Bard College of Springtide, a Child of the Sun Sorcerer bloodline, and a Horned One Warlock Pact. There are Elementals by Mackenzie de Armas, 4 new Elementals based on reactive elements. So there's some cool monsters there. What are the other ones, Teos?
And can I just say, this is such a geeky, like when you lean into geekitude, you know, like, so this is all about, like, if you've seen those awesome YouTube videos, or if you had a cool teacher in high school or college that like mixed two things together and it just like totally reacts wildly. That's the concept behind this. And then everything is sort of named after actual different elements coming together. It's just geekery upon geekery, and it's lovely. I so dig it. And not only are the monsters kind of cool and do things like explode when you kill them or have these sort of lashing out type reaction effects, but then you get this alternate rules for elemental compound encounters, which are things like if you have a fire elemental and an air elemental in the same encounter, they can give you things that are reactive to the characters. Like they might create an ash cloud with fire and air. But then also there might be things that, like, if your characters carry metal weapons, then this happens, right? It's really neat stuff. It's super creative, excellent stuff by Mackenzie de Armas.
That harkens back so well to those old Dragon magazine articles where, you know, the DMs that did these cool things in their home games would just write in and say, hey, and then we'd get to share all of that. So that's great. There's also an adventure, an 8th level adventure by Rich Lescouflair, called Well of the Lost Gods, where you have to stop an ancient laboratory from creating hazardous magic.
And I mean, how much do we like Rich Lescouflair? So, poof.
Yeah, very much. That's a great lineup there for content. Anything else in there you want to talk about, Teo?
James has a nice letter of the editor page, and I love that this sort of harkens back to Dungeon Magazine or Dragon Magazine, where you'd read the letter of the editor kind of with a keen interest into what's going sort of behind the mentality of the company, right? And James does that really well. He talks about the importance of good art and stimulating our imagination and creativity. And for sure, the art and layout in both these issues is just incredible. So that's neat. It's nice James just has a natural way of speaking to this. So it's great to read the letter from the editor. You can get the whole thing $5 a month as being part of the MCDM Patreon, or if you don't want to be on the Patreon model, you can simply pick up the issue on their store. I think it's slightly more if you buy it just directly from the store, the MCDM store.
So very worth it.
Yeah.
It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Really, it's top notch.
Speaking of top notch, we hear from our friend Mike Shea, Sly Flourish, where he talks about handling rests in D&D. And this is a topic that I keep coming back to as I run adventures or as I design adventures. Sort of what rests mean for the game, what the rules say it means, and then what it really means when we design adventures. What did Mike have to say?
So he first reminds of a couple of rules that we often forget. I see a lot of DMs forget this. One is that you can only take one long rest every 24 hours. And then the one that's really important when it comes to sort of resource consumption, which is after a long rest, you regain half of your expended hit dice, not all of them. So if you depleted resources enough for characters to spend their hit dice, they are slowly wasting away at those hit dice as long as that keeps on happening, and they'll get half of whatever they had. So it takes a while to get back up. So that's one nice thing. He reviews the rules of it, but then he guides us on how to balance rests with combat challenges. And his guidance is to be story first. So don't just aim for challenge level. Instead, say, what does the story demand? If we're in a dungeon, then we probably can't rest easily. If we're on a long trip, we might have lots of rests. And then based on what the story demands, that's your rest schedule. Now build the challenge appropriately. So if we want to throw a boss at our characters and they're fairly well rested, let's have waves of monsters and then the boss shows up. And so that's his approach for it, which is really great guidance. The article's full of some really good thinking. So, yeah.
And you can find that at slyflourish.com. And what's this about POC in Play Discord channel?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about this, but I follow POC in Play, and they announced on Twitter that they are creating a Discord channel that will be for POC creators, professionals, hobbyists, students who are creating content and sort of want to be able to build a community. They have right now an application form. So if you go to, we have the Twitter link in our thread, but it'll be a recent post on @POC in Play on Twitter. So if you go to @POC in Play, you can find the post, click on the form, which is an application form on Google, and you turn that in. And then I think they're just making sure that you are actually a POC, you are actually doing these kinds of things. And then get into the Discord, and they said they'll likely expand how many people are in it in the future, but they sort of want to start and build up a group and add from there. So it's a nice resource if you're interested.
Okay. Well, that's our abbreviated news this week because we want to hear the stars of the show, Marcello and Tim. So let's talk about Icewind Dale and your experiences. Now, yes, we got
spoiler warning too.
Yes, spoiler. We're going to talk about the entire adventure probably. So,
Yeah, I have players who are actually playing this. So if you're listening to this, turn it off. Like,
that's
skip.
right.
Go to the next one. You can listen in a year when we're done.
Okay, and we'll know if you're listening.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, I totally will.
We get the name of every listener, and we immediately send it to your DM.
Yeah, check it against DMs. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Just like GM Tim, if any of my Thursday Discordians are plug your ears.
We all know. These guys are like Santa. They have the list. They check it twice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A bad feeling when you cheat. I was a player cheating in Barrier Peaks, and I knew like where a key card was because there's key cards to get between levels, and I'm like looking behind this desk just cuz, and my DM's like, why do you want to look behind that desk? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, I'm a horrible person. I'm never doing this again.
and a terrible liar, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. Good job.
There was also
smooth.
Kudos to the DM. There was no key card behind that desk.
Yes, he moved it. Yes.
Important. So, Teos had a great idea, and that was to put a survey out to ask DMs what they thought of Rhyme if they were running it, and then to kind of compare that to what they thought about the other hardcover adventures. And the survey ended up bringing in quite a few great comments, a lot of good information for us. And so I'm going to let Teos take over and sort of walk through his questions and then start the discussion from there.
Yeah, and you know what we specifically want to do is to have the experience of people who had run several hardcovers, and so I think we put the number at 3 or more of the hardcover or hardback D&D adventures to see what folks thought, and it was interesting on a number of levels to see what the data looked like when you looked across some of these people who run a ton of these adventures. I mean, really very impressive. And Tim and Marcelo, you guys have both written a run on a good number of these. So you have that sort of experience in addition to everything else you run, which then helps you assess Rhyme well. And that's kind of what we were looking for. So the first question in the survey looked at just kind of establishing how much of Rhyme folks had run. Because I'm always curious whether a new book comes out, it's almost like the media treats it, social media treats it like we've all immediately read the adventure and run it.
What?
People will say, like, what'd you think of it? And you're like, I don't know. I might run this in the next year or so. I've read the first 5 pages.
It's on my bookshelf.
Exactly.
I really like the cover.
Yeah. And so that was an interesting question. What the results came back were 52% had read it all and run about 1 or 2 chapters, right? So they've gotten their feet wet. Because one of the things was we wanted people who had started running it. And then we had 24% who had read it all and run at least the 3 first chapters. which is pretty good. I mean, if you remember, those are really big chapters, so it's a fair amount of content. And then another quarter had read it all and run at least through chapter 4 or further. So I thought that was very interesting, that you only have a quarter that have reached chapter 4 or later, which is honestly around what I would have thought, but it's kind of interesting to see that validation. And I should say we had about 25 responses. The 2 people, I think one was a duplicate, so I'd say we had 22 responses. That's probably the number one. So Tim, Marcello, you've both started to run Rime, and what has your experience been like so far running it? Maybe we'll start with Marcello.
Well, it has, from my perspective, it certainly has been interesting, and I don't see. I enjoy the overall the way it's written. It just seemed that for me that this at least the chapters that I have been through have been very easy to kind of digest as far as content. Now I have been able. Now I normally run underneath the organized play umbrage there, so I find myself having to make sure that I'm considering the advancement rules with these the hardcovers, and just trying to make sure that I'm doing right by the rules of organized play while trying to provide as much of the content from each of the chapters that we're in for my players. Awesome. To make sure that balance that you were talking about earlier, Teos, is there, and I'm not straying too far from it.
Does that help you? Does that help you, that sort of running it through organized play rules, help you digest it and help you make the flow easier to DM, as opposed to if you were running it outside of that? Would it have been harder to put all the pieces together, do you think?
I think that I would have less considerations if I weren't running it under organized play. Of course, that kind of opens you up to be able to do even more with what's presented in the book. I would certainly say that now I've been running AL for a long time now, so it's kind of like I'm used to it. I enjoy it. I've been able to work within it, but if I didn't have to, I'd say that I definitely have more things at my disposal, at least I feel, as a DM than I would normally have.
So you run league games and then use the book to flesh them out? Is that what you mean? Like, you run the league storyline through the book, or do you?
No. Well, what I meant by that is that I use the season 10 guidelines while I'm running the hardcover. I thought we were just talking about the hardcover now. If we're talking about the
no, that's cool.
No, okay. Yeah, we're talking about the hardcover only.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we were talking about the modules, that'd be something else different.
Yeah.
It was just the way you worded that. I was making sure that I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know, you can run the hardcover of any of the adventures following guidelines that the Adventures League publishes, and so you level at certain points based on how much you play, or it depends on each season. They give you rules for how do you level and so on, and it is an interesting balance where you have to follow these guidelines. You can't just add on entire chapters or do whatever you want, or so it forces some balance around it, and then you have to look at how magic items move across and all that.
Yeah, the big thing is that treasure tales. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, how has your run been so far?
So slower. My group that wanted to play, so they wanted to play a book, and because I was in the middle of writing season 10, I was like, hey, this seems like it's going to be a really killer story, and I'd gotten to do some of the play tests, so I knew some of what was coming. And so I suggested it. They bought into it, and we play once a month. So it's slow going, but we kind of are ready for that. It's
have you
been
guys
a challenge.
Oh yeah, how so?
So the story doesn't flow. Everything in it is good. Like it's a really good, like all the stuff is awesome. The writers rocked it. The whoever decided A to B to C to D to E, that's where it falls apart. And I don't mean that. Sorry, I guess I should preface this. In my humble opinion,
Sure.
and I fully acknowledge that I am not an expert in writing this stuff. I will kind of like toot my own horn though. I am an expert in running this stuff. Like I run 8 games in a month, like 8 different groups every month, and most of them are weekly or bi-weekly. So I know how to run a game, and I know what I need as a DM in order to run that game. And this story didn't flow for that. And I've been putting more prep time into getting this adventure ready for my once a month game than I do for my weekly Eberron game with 6 14-year-olds. Like that should alone just kind of like say like a lot. Like it's a good book. Everything in it is great. It just doesn't story.
Yeah, when I think of sort of having gone to conventions and maybe run the same adventure 7 times, it's always different, but you can always, normally with a published adventure, what's going to happen, right? So even though the characters might bring strange things and make weird things happen, the story is pretty much the same. If I had to run this adventure for 8 different groups, every run could not just be different based on the players, but it could be different. Totally different.
Oh yeah.
I'd never thought about it that way, but that is even more terrifying.
Yeah.
When I was reading over this, I had a question in my mind because it is very sandboxy, right? And so, are either of you DMs that sort of naturally like a sandbox?
Hit and miss for me. It depends on my group. I allowed my groups to lead through play. So if they provide, so I got one. They just did part of the 10 towns where they can run for mayor. And the one who the group nominated the barbarian, who's like boisterous and loud, who has actually like taken a bunch of the copper pieces they found in one of the treasure, given it to a blacksmith, and has them making commemorative coins for the different events that they have, so he can hand them out as they travel around the rest of the rhyme. And beautiful. I'm like, you know what? Yes, that is totally. And so that's become almost the focus more than the actual story, right? Like I think cool. I might. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna play with that. I think somehow, but it's.
What about you, Marcelo? Are you a kind of sandbox DM, or do you like to have it all prescribed?
I kind of enjoy both, but I guess it depends on who I'm prepping a game for. If I'm at the con, then I want that linear. Hey, these are the points we need to hit. So I know where that. So I know what I need to get done to at least give the my players what the designer intended, along with of course hopefully meeting their desires as well. But for the hardcovers, I enjoy those gaps that allow for the DM to interject their own fiat into the adventure as well. I mean, the players are a big part of that too, but I like being thrown a bone too.
Yeah.
Well, it was fun. Shawn and I sort of deliberately read the adventure as we were doing the podcast sessions, and so which is fun because then we'd record and we'd have a set of expectations. We'd talk about what we read, and then we'd read the next piece and go, oh, okay. And it often didn't match our expectations for both of us. And we, if you listen to the different episodes, that comes up a lot. We're kind of like, oh, we thought this was going to kind of build in this way, but it didn't. And that is both freeing in that you can have a lot more ability to do whatever you want, but it's also surprising. And I think like I like a plan. Even when I allow great freedom to my characters and things like what you're talking about, Tim, like if they want to mint their own coins and stuff, I love playing with those kinds of things. But I kind of want to know what the possibilities are they're going. And it can be 4 different possibilities or whatever. But if I don't know what's happening next, or if it's not logical, that gives me a lot of pause. And I certainly felt that in this case.
Even just the hard plot line. Like if they had given us the hard plot line so that the DMs who open the book can go, okay, I see the trajectory. And then you kind of like, you know, I think the one that did that, one of the best was I'm looking at Tomb of Annihilation.
Yeah.
Like it just here's your plot line. Like it had its issues, but I mean all the books are going to. It's there's too many of us. There's no way it's going to be good for everyone. But
town,
it had
jungle,
you're going to start in the town, you're going to go to the jungle, you're going to wander for a while. Eventually you'll find this city, you're going to wander for a while. Eventually you find this tomb, you're going to wander for a little bit, and then I'm going to kick your ass, right? Like but we know that those are the things that's going to happen, right? And if you succeed, bravo, well done. DM wasn't expecting it, right?
And it all makes
was kind of like
it all has an arc, right? Because it all is because you're trying to do X, and X is at the end. So we're going to go through some steps to get to the end. And here it's funny because you think you may be doing X, but you are told initially you can't do X, and then you suddenly stumble onto X, and then there's still more to do.
Yeah. that was my big thing for Rhyme there. It seemed to me that the arc is there, and there are these other, what I would consider like major adventure points. I mean, one, you're talking about Sunblight. You're talking about this warlord's fortress up in the spine of the world that was the spawning point of the Charlatan dragon. Then you've got this city, this Netheril city, stuck way out in the Ragged Glacier, looking to be explored, and then, but wait a minute, Auril, this demi-goddess, has dropped a malady on the people of the Icewind Dale that they've endured for all this time, and it seems like the major plot point of the adventure. But then you kind of like GM Tim was saying, is you got all these other things here. They kind of like they seem like they're there to distract or to take away from that. And then, like Teos was saying, players could literally, my guys, they never left their area of the 10 towns. They right now they've never been to Bryn Shander or anywhere other than the towns around Mare Dualdon, Lonelywood, Tremolane, Bremen, just in that area. They never left. They went to Calvin's Cairn to take care of to rescue some mountaineers, and then from this area they went up to the Sea of Moving Ice, Dark Duchess, Angajuk Spell, and then they went out to go get Auril. They never left that area. You know what I mean? So what do you do in that respect? I can't. And they're taking on the overarching plot of the book, but yet all these other things. No, hey, look, Bryn Shander's the big city. They can handle the dragon. Or, hey, why do I care about some Durgar warlord up in the spine of the world? I don't live there. I live in these towns surrounding this frozen lake.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah. Now, Tim, you mentioned Tomb of Annihilation, and I'm going to go to this next question that we asked in a survey, which was, which other hardback adventures have you run? And this was part of a qualifying question to sort of say, like, hey, I want to make sure, the people filling out the survey know that we wanted you to have run other things, so that you have that perspective. But it also was interesting because it tells us of the people who answered the survey, what had they run the most. And the most played were first Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage, then Descent into Avernus. Then it was a tie between Curse of Strahd, Storm King's Thunder, and Tomb of Annihilation. And then it was Horde and Tiamat, which I thought was interesting because you have a lot of the recent adventures had been played, but then also Horde and Tiamat. But then it was actually lowest was Princes and Rage of Demons, Out of the Abyss. where we're sort of the lowest, even those were the 2 and number 3 in terms of order of release. Of the 22 or so people that had answered, 2 had run 9 adventures.
Wow.
Which is impressive.
Yeah.
The average number was almost 5 adventures, if you break it down. So I thought that was pretty interesting. What adventures have you run, Marcello, and what stood out to you as particularly awesome?
Okay, well, I got into Adventures League as a DM because I did play for about a year prior to that when Curse of Strahd released, and once I saw that book released, I made the decision that I was going to make the jump because I was a Ravenloft guy. I remember the Ravenloft modules from AD&D, and I was fascinated by it. So it's like, this will be the one where I make them. But Curse of Strahd, I did run the classics revisited from Tales of Yawning Portal, Storm King's Thunder, Tomb of Annihilation, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, Autumn Season. Did a couple levels of Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And then, of course, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. I ran 3 games, 3 sessions, 3 different directions, just like Shawn was saying. They did 3 different things. And then of course, I'm running my 1 game here for Rime of the Frost Maiden. And we're about 18 sessions in right now.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tim, how about you?
So I think I've done most of them. I haven't done Strahd.
Interesting.
I am the one DM that I know who does not like Strahd, and I am going on record. I don't even care if people are, what's wrong with you? Don't care. Okay.
We have to stop recording right now.
Yeah, I know. I know.
We'll be muting Tim for the remainder.
Bye,
of the
guys. Have a great night. Yeah.
No.
So
it's funny. I'm not much of a horror person. Somehow I end up writing a lot of horror things, or a fair number, but I'm not a super horror person. Though I do like the original Ravenloft.
Didn't you write an adventure for Curse of Strahd, the artifact? I think it was.
Yeah, I think my first adventure for Dungeon was horror themed. Yeah, I mean, I do kind of like exploring it, but it is not my, like, I watch 0 horror films, unless it's something like Aliens where it's more sci-fi, but yeah, and I'm definitely not a gore person or anything like that, so it's funny that, all right, so
I don't know.
What you ran.
I've did Princes of the Apocalypse. I've done Out of the Abyss. I'm doing Storm King Thunder right now with another group. I've done Tales. I've done Ghosts. I've done Tomb of Annihilation. I've done. I started Dragon Heist, and then that group was all, we kind of like went way off, and it's like, never mind. We're just going to close this book. I didn't even touch Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I'm not a dungeon delver DM. I'm not good at them.
Yeah.
And I didn't do Descent yet, but I've used parts of Descent. So I'm a book user more than I'm a book doer, if that makes sense. So I grab huge chunks and I'll just plug them in. One of my favorite things about any of the books, the newer books, is the world encounters. Yeah. Anyways,
awesome.
I've done a good fair share.
So we next asked everybody how they rated Rime as an adventure, and I think Wizards of the Coast will be very happy with the results. Most 15 out of our respondents rated it a 4 out of a 5, which I think is really very good. I mean, we as gamers often like to complain about stuff and something's not quite perfect, so I consider a 4 on a 5 scale to be really very good. 1 was poor, 3 was average, 5 was superb. That's sort of the rating scale we threw in here. I thought that was pretty good. If I recall correctly, I think you both rated it either 4 or 5.
Well, I thought I'd given it a 3.
Did you? Okay.
I think so, but on, like I told you before we started, I do not totally remember all of my answers. I'm sorry. I love you.
I don't remember my name. I don't remember who I am. So
I'm sorry. Okay. What? Who?
What?
Yeah. It's solid. My biggest problem is the story factor. Like,
yeah.
Do you know what it felt like? And the more we kind of talk about it, the more it felt like a Lord of the Rings horror. So in Lord of the Rings, you start off thinking that there's this one bad person. Like if you've never read the books, then you'll watch the movie and you'll be like, oh, that's the bad person, or that's the arch nemesis, and then it'll carry on. You're like, oh wait, there's another one. Oh wait, there's a bigger one. Oh wait, there's a bigger one. And I think that's what they were trying to do, was they were trying to use one to feed into the others.
Yeah.
But there was no crossover between the movies.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And now that you mention it, it does set itself up to work that way very well, sort of a wheels within wheels. But the wheels are not within each other. They are. The wheels have come off.
I think to me, the classic wheels within wheels is you're against the giants to the drow to Lolth, right? Like the classic series. It's just a bunch of hill giants. Well, actually, it's this kind of giant. Oh, it's that, it's the drow that are pulling the strings. But who's pulling the drow strings? And that's good because it all relates. But, what's weird in this adventure is that the Dwergar aren't being controlled by, say, Auril. And that makes it so that it doesn't fully reveal that way, right? Whereas if it was all coming out of Netheril, or if Auril had her home in the Lost City, the Netherese city, then that would make sense somehow. But yeah,
that's what I've done.
And hopefully your players aren't listening.
They are.
But something I see in that though is like I said, it seemed like that there were like three bosses, like GM Tim described, and they were leading into one another. If you end up in my particular situation where the players kind of like focus on one thing and they don't drive themselves through their actions into these other areas where they can be fed more of this plot, because you can only dump. I was taking a lot of those rumors out of Chapter 2 and then dumping them in to just the town of Targos that they were based out of, and using the speaker in the town as the plot point to drive other things too. But what makes that great though is you could run this book 3 different ways. If you wanted to go ahead and kind of make it a little bit linear, you can make that fortress and the Chardalyn Dragon one thing. You can make the quest to get to this Netherese city another thing, or you could just make it just about dealing with the Rime of the Frostmaiden. There's a lot of options there. Yeah.
True.
It's true.
Great point. Really great point. So I'll jump into this again. I had another question I was going to ask you, but I know what I was going to ask. So you started in Targos, Marcello. How did you choose Targos, or did the players choose it?
I rolled the dice. I rolled the dice in the chapter,
Nice.
And then Targos was the town. So that was immediately,
and it clearly worked.
It was immediately the focus of my my reading, my prep was just Targos and everything that was around it at first, because I knew that that first chapter was dealing with. I said there's enough locations here, along with their respective quests that were kind of attached to them, to keep them busy for a couple of sessions, to where I had to start thinking beyond that and looking. I did much like you and Shawn did when you were prepping your respective shows for your review of the product. I only read just what I need for maybe 1 or 2 sessions, and then when they get close, then that's when I put in the extra reading to move on beyond that. So I had some stumbling points too, but when I came across them, I either was very transparent to my players about this was an oversight I made, so how we can collectively come to some type of consensus that incorporates some of these plot points I missed, or
You don't
what they don't know won't hurt them or hurt me, right?
That's
Tim,
the key
did you?
that's the key to every game, though. I think is that's something that I learned more recently than I care to admit. To be honest, is that I don't need to apologize for missing things that they don't know about. Like, it's just like you forget. So do I. I mean, you forget that you have a familiar. I have many more familiars, so I am not going to stress about this at all anymore. And yeah.
Do you even know what your alignment is?
Right? Like, do you even care? Do you even align anymore? Yeah.
Do you even align, bro? Tim, what town or towns did you like, and were you drawn to, or how did you choose?
So we've done Goodmead, and I really liked it because I think Goodmead is my most fun. It's the most. I found it the most realistic. I know that sounds so silly in a fantasy game, but it's the one that reacted, I think, the most reasonably. I think that's the better way to put it. Like the characters had a scenario. My other thing too is when writing this, I got to like come up with neat ideas about Goodmead in the area. So, excuse me. So I was drawn to it when writing for the League.
Awesome.
We've also done the East Haven. And they're just kind of like currently. So my group came on as caravan employees, so they're protecting a caravan. So we were able to like literally kind of walk up into the 10 towns, and then the caravan forces them to move. And they all rolled on their secrets. So I'm trying to force those secrets in, even though again it's like, remember you have a familiar, so you're not going to worry about these secrets, right? So it's kind of like the same thing over again. So,
but you will remember when I remind you of the thing that hatches out of your body.
Yeah, as long as I remember too, right? Like that's the key right there, right? Like I know that somebody in one of my games. This is the other problem running too many games. Somebody has been hit by a slod. I don't think I remember who properly, and I have a couple notes like sitting on my screen right now, and I'm like, it's like kind of getting to that like I wrote the wrong name down. I feel, but I didn't. I don't know.
That's where you have to put it together a online Google form survey to your players and say like, how is your secret going? Write your secret name here and how it's going so far, and
I'll get somebody
I totally know
back.
what it is. Sure.
What secret?
Players. I wanted to say one thing that I thought was really good about the rating of Rhyme is nobody rated it below average. And that's pretty cool, right? Nobody said this is trash. Like everybody was like, at worst, it's as good as the others. And when you look at how people rated overall, all of 5e hardback adventures, most rated them a 4 out of 5, and again, none rated below average, which is super strong. And I don't know if just fans of our show are more positive. Possibly. It could be, Sean. We hope. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's really very good. And I don't disagree with that. I mean, I have my adventures that I don't super love out of the bunch. But if you were to strongly argue that my least favorite is average, I don't know that I would super contest that, Now, we did ask.
Shows that they know what they're doing. Like the books are good. They're good. It's not like we're getting bad products, right?
Right,
like, right. And you can't. Otherwise, like in Canada, they start at $70, right? Like you can't. It's expensive to buy books up here, right? We make them, we ship them to you guys, you ship them back to us and sell them for more. Thank you, America. So it's this weird thing where it's like it has to be at least a good. I think this just has a less of a flow than some of the others. That's my critique about it. It's not a bad product. It's just not as good as some of the others that have been coming out. It's the same as Tiamat. It was a rough first book, but the republished edition is, what a great fix that is.
Even for being, it gets dinged partly by, I think that they were struggling stat block wise, so some of the balance isn't quite there, and that's been fixed in the reprint. But I think a lot of times I see people online talking and going back and thinking about it and going, that really wasn't that bad. It did a lot of things well. I was recently having that thought as I was writing a blog post on sort of, you know, how characters can have memorable campaigns. It does a lot to tie you into the larger setting. So one of the questions we asked was, what is how does your least favorite 5e hardback adventure rate? And I thought this was also interesting. 9 rated it at 2. Again, 1 is poor, 3 is average, 5 is superb. 8 rated it average, and only 7 rated their worst as poor. That's, I think, really very good news for Wizards of the Coast. That again, there's so few. You know, even the one you least like, you're not rating it too badly. And then when it came to favorites, it was all 4s or 5s, about half in each category. So that's not bad. Do you don't have to name it, but do you have an adventure that you're like, oh man, there is certainly one I dislike vehemently?
Oh, I don't have any problem saying which one mine was. And it was because I dove into DMing with Curse of Strahd when I did the look back, and I was contemplating running Court of the Dragon Queen. I began to read through that, and keep in mind, I'm looking at through the lens of an organized play DM. Mm-hmm. There were certainly some things in there that just were going to take a little bit of work to kind of to work into an organized play format, because you're taking the current set of organized play guidance for whatever the season is, and then taking it back. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And during that time frame, from what I understand, the league was just kind of in their formation right when that book actually released. So perhaps there wasn't a lot of syncing there with what the vision for organized play would be, with that being the sole 5th edition product at the time.
Right.
And
yeah,
I
was going to say, a couple of those early books, I recall that the math sort of doesn't work out for leveling or for treasure, and so there were complaints on forums, sort of like, how am I supposed to make this work? My players are, you know, not at the right level, or under geared or over geared, and because of that, I was like, you know what, maybe if I have a chance, but to take a hard look and try to crunch some of these things in, I take a stab at it. But then Wizards did something wonderful. They republished it, and they took out a lot of those areas that were a little bit troubling for me. And you know, I definitely keep it on the stack to consider in the future. How about you, Tim? Any real, man, this one gets me?
I already did mine. It's Strahd, but I think. Do you know, I'm looking at these, and I have a question. Did you ask? You didn't ask what about it was your least favorite, and I think if you had asked if theme was the reason why they'd give a 2 or a 3, I bet that would give more of an answer.
That's true. Some people may just be like, this is not my kind of adventure. It's not that it failed in any way, but it's just not my thing.
And I think I'm like Marcello as well, is in that, like, it's when you're a con DM, whether by trial or fire, or by learning how to do it there, you have those like 4-hour adventures that you have 3 hours to do, and you're there to game. So when you have a book that's a little bit looser, it's hard to like cram that down. And I think that was my biggest thing, because Strahd was the first one to really do that. Like it was just really like, here's the world, and it's like, oh crap, what the hell do I do with this? Right? Like, so I think that's the other reason why it was one of my least favorites, is because that's you had this conditioning. And
I played through I was at a gaming store in Texas at the time playing Horde of the Dragon Queen, and it was interesting to see the DM sort of decide what the pace would be, and it was hard for them to fit that in like a 4-hour block at a store, and they did struggle with that. It was good. I still had fun. I think my pick is probably Princes. I don't like the whole missing Mirabar delegation, and the the way that the DM is instructed as to how this should work, and of course then they do things like put the intro in the middle, and there's a lot of organizational but that one is the one that I struggle with the most. But the parts are fine. It's just that it doesn't. I ran a younger group of players that were middle school at the time, and it did not go well. They never could follow why they were doing anything, and they just, I don't know, it's a dungeon, and I guess now it's themed with this element. I don't know, we're just stabbing stuff. They couldn't get into it. That was interesting. Shawn, do you want to slay a favorite child?
Wow. that Acquisitions Incorporated adventure, that was horrible, Teos.
Yeah.
Only the second half.
Only the last 3 chapters. I was like, oh god.
No, the one that I ran that I had the hardest time with was the I can't remember the name of it now.
Wow.
The one the Rage of Demons.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Because it started rough. It's always a rough start to you've been captured and you're prisoners. So I had to work my way around.
Oh yeah, you have nothing.
Yeah.
Everything on your character sheet you don't have.
Right. So what I did with that was I made my own beginning where they are approached by someone saying, "We need you to infiltrate this drow prison. So we're going to set it up where you get captured, but we're going to help you by hiding some of your equipment on you, by hiding some spell components on you." So it was a choice that the players made to be captured. And then I got there, and there are 72 NPCs that you have to deal with. And so then I'm trying to figure out how to do this. Now you want to talk about forgetting your familiar. Here's just a truckload, and they're all interesting. They're all cool. They're all fun, but there's just way too many of them. But some of them are actually important for the story going forward. So you don't
really know which ones.
Exactly. So you have to sort of ferret out which ones are going to serve. And so what I just use them as cannon fodder. Every session, one of them died. Horrible.
I just know that I didn't run that one. I read it and I provided feedback, and I wasn't listened to, and which is the story of my life. And it happens at home too. But I just imagined that, like in session 15 or something, I would be like, and the Myconid says, and someone would go, "There's a Myconid with us."
Yeah,
exactly. So it took too much planning too far ahead for me. Again, being someone who I'm happy to ad lib, but I need to be told ahead of time what's important and what's not. So that
ad libbing is great, but ad libbing where you're 2 NPCs talking with each other. Oh my god. Yep. I'm not here for that. I don't even like that in my live drag show, for God's sakes. And they make me do some weird voices. Okay. Like, no, not here.
Yeah.
Well, at the end, we're going to have you do all the voices.
Oh my God.
So we asked what rhyme did better than previous hardcovers, which is a perfect segue given our little complaint session we just had. Several commented that it is a more modular and non-prescriptive adventure that lends itself to DM modification or customization. The DM has the freedom to pick what they like. A lot of people mentioned the word sandbox, so I think, this is the perfect fit. If you like to sort of have a menu of options and go in whichever direction you want, boom, right? Delivers. And several noted that the pieces, such as individual locations or quests, are some of the best that they've seen. And I think that's a really spot on, right? I mean, when we were reviewing this, we would read some of these locations, just be like, "Oh, that is so cool," right?
Absolutely.
Did you, as you were reviewing or reading, have parts that, like, what's a part that, like, you of rhyme that you just super like, this is awesome?
Marcello, go for it.
If I'd have to say, I liked all of chapter 1, but if there was one point, it would probably be the whole area around the Sea of Moving Ice here, your Dark Duchess, your Angajux Bell, and then of course Solstice, Aural's Island. I liked those areas because they presented they were at least crucial, at least in my mind, to at least for my game. But overall, in the adventure itself, I liked that there were a lot of awakened creatures, and I'm the guy that I enjoy the voices and things like that too when I do have the ability to present them. But I just really like the fact that, all right, so what's this bell do here on this dock in the middle of this ice, and ring it, ding a ding ding ding. All right, what's supposed to happen? Nothing happens. And then boom, the ice explodes and this giant sperm whale comes out and says, "Oh, I had him." The first thing that came out of his mouth was "You rang," you know what I mean? And they were like, like, oh my goodness, we ran into a talking moose, we ran into a lake monster that don't like us, and now we've got oh my goodness, it's like a real talking whale. What's going on here? And
please tell me your moose was like full Ontario and almost Minnesota accent, eh? Like it's got to be just full Canadian, eh? You just got to go right in there.
I just had him bellowing as he was charging at players and throwing them all over the place. And they're like, "Oh man, I can't believe we're getting our butts kicked by a moose. This is embarrassing."
You ever seen a moose? Those things will tear down a rock. Yeah. They are terrifying creatures.
I mean, when you look at those size of those things.
The Summer Star, the Black Cabin, I thought that was very, very clever.
Yeah.
That's cool. How about you, Tim? Any pieces that really stood out?
So actually, I'm like really excited for the city, to be honest, because it's just so different. Like, and I only got into I got into D&D because of Eberron. So only been playing. I played one game of D&D before Eberron came out in 2008.
Yeah.
So and it was not my favorite experience. So I bought Eberron because it was cool. I didn't play 3.5 at all, like at all. I didn't run until 4th, and nice. 4th got me into DMing. And before that, I had tried like say Star Trek and stuff like that. So for me, it was kind of cool to try and sort of merge these fantasy and sci-fi, but it didn't feel like it was forced like some of Spelljammer feels. I'm teasing, I'm sorry. So it just was fun, right? So it was kind of dark. It lended itself to the horror, and I'm excited. But I moved her there, so she's the reason that it's there and still potent. That's so cool. I'm tying them in together, right? Because I feel like it needs that draw for me. But yeah, it's cool. I thought it was like neat, and even the idea that you can have that what's it called, the stuff that happens when you have a long rest there.
Oh, the Arcane
Blight.
Arcane Blight.
The fact that they built in if you survive it, you're immune, and if you don't, you're nothic. Like cool, and also your depth perception joke the other night, I just howled like I was in the middle of doing I think I was on the train home, and I just started giggling my ass off. People moved away from me, and like it was like, because it took me a minute. I'm like, why would he, oh my god, one eye, god, right? Like it was so
that was key. So we asked folks what they liked which chapter they liked the most, and it was heavily towards chapter 1, but some did write, they hadn't run that much of it. But it's cool that you want a strong start, so it's good that they really like the elements that are in chapter 1. And when we asked what was the least favorite chapter in Rime, the most was the dragging attacking 10 towns, and they specifically would add in comments around it being hard to run or an unexpected part of the narrative. Interestingly, some votes for chapter 1 in that it was hard to plan. So I think this is your DMs that aren't loving sandbox and want a little more guidance. They had trouble choosing which options they want and knowing how to keep their players hooked. I thought that was an interesting comment. A few more votes for chapter 7 because they found the falling city to be an unexpected story or strange conclusion or uncertainty of how to run it. A couple votes for chapter 2, and then everything else just had 2 or 3 votes wherever it came out. But I thought that was interesting. Strongly it was around the dragon attack and this feeling disjointed and difficult to understand how to run. And for sure, when I looked at it, I was kind of like, wait, how's this work? And I think if you love improv, maybe you don't care and you just do whatever you want. I watched a couple of online versions of the dragon attack, and some of them were very clearly like they're just the dragons wherever they want it to be, and they're just making it interesting. And I'm like, that's so much better, but my brain needs to break it down and I want to know what the math is, and then I'll criticize it and do my own version. But like, I have to do that breakdown, and it was exceedingly hard to do the math, which I thought was interesting. How did you guys feel about that dragon attack chapter, if you've read it?
Go for it, Marcello.
Well, what I ended up doing, because I'm probably one of the ones in that boat that said chapter 4 was a break. I felt like it in the plot flow was that I brought the dragon to where my guys were at. Like at the beginning, my guys only stayed in one area, and so I only focused in that chapter on that one area. What happens when they hit X town? If my guys are already there, then hey, rumors reach them. Hey, there's this big metal flying thing. We don't know where it came out of the spine of the world, and it's wreaking havoc on the 10 towns. And hey, everyone's running to Bryn Shander, and again, their attitude is like, why are we going to the big city for? Hey, we got walls right here. We'll wait for it to come when it's our turn, and we'll fight it. And so they did everything from where they were at, and I brought the dragon to them.
Nice.
What I didn't anticipate there was that the book says that the dragon does a couple things tactfully, but they somehow you give them the polymorph spell, right? Next thing you know, you got 2 King Kongs on top of the buildings, and the giant apes are leaping up, grabbing the dragon by the legs and dragging them down, and then they just proceeded to get crazy on it. And Charlatan dragon never made it back.
What level?
They were still.
What level were they?
They may have been on the cusp of like level 5 or 6, somewhere in there. Of course, I'm doing progression, not by milestone, but by AL. So the AL hours count there. So yeah, they have the ability to bring that thing down. I was not expecting it. I was expecting to get a couple strafing runs in there. All right, off the Bryn Shander, but no. Then so I was like, well, what do I do here? I've just kind of messed with the arc a little bit of the book, and then I just said, hey, I go back to the speaker. The speaker's like, hey, we've got scrap from this big dragon. I wonder how we can turn this to the town's advantage. And so I just made up this thing about how the speaker is like, hey, send a runner to Bryn Shander, let them know that we've got something they might be interested in, and we'll welcome any grains, any coin, any resources to help rebuild our walls, and left it at that. They were good with that. But yeah, definitely chapter 4. That dragon. And for a group that doesn't leave like a certain area or whatever, they may be into the I don't careism. It's like, hey, I'm worried about this area, not these other towns I've never been to before. So I thought it would be fun to bring the dragon in, but I unless there's buy-in about the hey, the whole 10 towns is our home, we need to go rushing to their aid type of thing, you may not get the true essence of what I think that chapter was wanting to bring to the whole story.
Yeah, but smart that you brought the dragon to them then, and lean into what your players want, right?
That's very cool.
Oh yeah, they did. They were like, they had never
blowing it
seen
away,
anything
or-
like it.
or
Well,
do
and
they wish it was a little
they
more
were
challenging?
trying to get me to. So that ray that came out, was I able to see how far of a distance it went? And I'm like, the best way to see it is to come up on it and see if it, but they were trying to avoid it, but yet try to attack it. So I had a lot of sacred flames. I eventually had the polymorphs into the giant ape to go into melee with it. But they were doing their best. Magic missiles. I had my spellcasters had burned all their slots. trying to hit that thing with magic missiles until they had almost nothing left in the tank. But it was that effort, man. They a couple guys went in there and they went into melee, and then that's what eventually did it.
That's cool. Neat. Well, and that's the best. If it's an easy fight, but they have a blast, then it's all good.
I got nothing to add.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so that was our survey, and then Shawn, we had a question come in. Do we want to tackle that?
I'm going to try to sum this up. This is from one of our patrons who was on our Slack for being a patron, and he asked a question that is pretty hard to grapple with, and so that's why I'm going to bring it to our experts here. So this DM, Tom Hay, and Tom, thank you for being a patron. He started DMing a couple years ago after playing D&D for the first time, so he's run about 30 sessions.
Thanks.
He started with a group of friends who are all newcomers, and then he has a side homebrew campaign with some family members. And his main campaign, he started with Lost Mines of Phandelver, and now that he's done, he wants to jump into Rime of the Frostmaiden. The problem is that the players are halfway through level 4, and it's going to be a challenge to bring them into this adventure for many reasons. So Tom sees 3 ways that he can go. He can slow down leveling. He can make the encounters harder, or he could skip a lot of stuff in chapters 1 and 2. And he's sort of discussed the various options with his players. And his players say that they're happy with slowing things down, but he fears that they might not be once, if you get used to leveling at a certain pace and then everything slows down, it gets a little frustrating. Not to mention that figuring out XP for monster, it's a whole thing when the book itself doesn't really use XP leveling. He thinks that he could manage B, which is make the encounters harder, but he's a little inexperienced and he's worried about messing it up. And then he says C, which is skipping chapters 1 and 2, isn't really something he wants because there's so much great stuff. And so he's wondering about different ways to handle it. His conundrum is how to go into this adventure now in a way that makes everyone happy and doesn't ruin the campaign that he's worked so hard to establish. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tom's conundrum.
GM Tim, please.
Oh, okay. So I'm reading what he wrote is what they wrote. I shouldn't assume gender. Pardon me. So I'm reading what's written, and narratively I've got a plan. So I think one. Okay, here's what I would do. Number 1, get rid of XP. Go just drop it, jump into as you need it, level up, milestoning. And I wouldn't even call it milestoning. I would call it when you're ready. Mm-hmm. So, and especially because I see that you were considering Storm King's Thunder. And that's like the granddaddy of milestoning as far as I'm concerned, because you can spend months in just chapter 5 or level 5 wandering the world, experiencing the world, right? So if you want to dive into the stuff that's crammed into chapter 1 and 2, you need to drop leveling right off the bat. Not even slow it down, just like let it go. I see here, I'm really inexperienced, so I might mess up. Good. Mess up bad, mess up horribly, kill the entire team. Do it. And then go, wait, you're not dead. You wake up with 1 hit point and you're in some sort of prison, or you're in an ice cave, or you're Luke Skywalker with the damn Wampa. Like you can't break what you're doing. It's not possible because it's all in your imagination. So please make mistakes and then learn from how to not do those again. Don't forget TPK. K means knockout. right? So
Yeah.
so you don't
Wait,
need
what?
to
What?
like. And I know all the grognards are like, no, it doesn't, but it does. It's because K's are K's.
I've been doing that wrong.
So I think that's the big thing is like you don't need to like really stress this idea that you have to be perfect, because I will tell you from a professional point of view, you're not going to be. You will make mistakes all the time, even if you've been doing this for a long time.
That is
And
a
I
great
think-
point.
And I think that the other thing that is really important here is that increasing you know, I can read, like, you've already got this planned more than I do. Like, it's like you know what you need to do, and you're weaving the characters' own stories and the adventures. You're swapping things out. Like, you know, you've got this.
Yep.
You've got this. You've got this. You don't have a conundrum. You have imposter syndrome, and you need to just you need to just go and get rid of it, because I know that I can hear this person listening going, you didn't tell me what to do. It's like, well, I kind of did.
I think you did a great job, Tim. I think the problem that a lot of people had with this adventure is they couldn't do everything that was in these early parts, and they were having trouble finding the path. This fixes that problem for you. Their fourth level, you're bringing them in, follow the path that you're laying out here in the question you asked. You know, do the good mead in East Haven speaker reputation plan. You know, do the coolest of these tasks. Then you don't have to worry about all of the intertwining things. Just put them on that path. Do the 2 or 3 coolest quests, and you don't have to worry about leveling because they're already leveled.
Yeah, I mean, something that I'd just like to add. I mean, I think GM Tim pretty much hit the nail on the head with everything. I just want to say first, Tim, thanks for taking the helm of DMing. You know, we certainly need a lot of DMs, man. And you know what? Just like GM Tim said, you're going to make mistakes. Hey, how do we learn? You know, we make mistakes, and you know what? Hey, when you make those mistakes, how about you let us all know what those mistakes are? You know, so we can benefit from your experience. You know, that's something I always try to do too. When I slip, or I make a mistake too. You know, kind of elevate everybody, including myself, in doing that. I would say, if you're so dead set on trying to get those earlier things in to your entry point into the book, then bring them in other ways through narrative. Maybe bring some of those NPCs that were in the beginning in maybe in a brief encounter while you're moving about the Icewind Dale. There's nothing saying that some of those NPCs can't be in other towns that you're at. In fact, I did it with Belen Harper. I moved her into the 10 towns, just stopping to pick up supplies, and then that's how my players contacted with her. So there's certain ways to, if there are aspects in Chapter 1 that you like, of bringing them in, you may have to be creative with it, but you can do it. I mean, and you know, with all plans, I mean, even I mean, judging from what you know, Shawn, you had read, it seems like he does have a. I mean, he does have a. I'm sorry, I don't want to defer gender, but it seems like they have a pretty good idea of what they want to do, and they're you know, just like with every plan, I would say, you know, strive to be flexible, because if the players aren't going to adjust your plan, you know, you may have to, just based off of something that you see that you didn't originally plan for.
You know, and the best part about running chapters 1 and 2 as is, like, don't play with them. Like, use 1 or 2 of the 10 towns instead of 10. Like, as you heard from the 2 of us who are running it right now, we're both only using a couple of the 10 towns. Like, using 10 towns is, I mean, the idea of playing 10,000 NPCs, no thank you, right? Like, no, it's not going to happen. So do that. And then the other thing is, it ties, by doing chapters 1 and 2 at level 4, it literally ties into your concept of slowing down experience. Like you're going to be able to take those really cool encounters in chapter 2 that you know of, like the ones that we talked about, and you're going to be able to actually do them in a session. So you're going to be able to just power through like one of the caverns on the lakeside and just kind of like dive into that dungeon and get out, and you're going to be able to do it quick because the players are just going to be like, this is easy. But just because it's mechanically easy doesn't mean that it's A, not going to take a toll on the players, B, not something that you're going to be able to like tap into later, and C, not going to be able to something that you can just like pump up when they're not ready for it because they think that it's so easy. There's lots of things that you're going to be able to do to really like really add to that horror aspect, right? Like, I mean, the best horror movies, I mean, the ones that I'd like watch are like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Like that's hardly a horror movie, but it's always about like falling into a false sense of security. Like it's the reason, like we sit there in the movie theater yelling, don't go into the house, but you don't think about it. The house is your home, right? So you're safe in the house. So you think that going into the house is an okay thing. And this is the same concept. You're going to get them going on like these chapter 1 and 2 things. They're going to be like, what's the big deal? I don't understand why it's so scary. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, dragon. And they're going to be like crapping their pants. It'll be great.
Or shape-shifting into giant apes.
Even better.
I have 2 quick thoughts on this. One is, B, which is to make the encounters harder. I think that Tom's on the right track here in saying that it's a lot of work. And it's not about failing. Like Tim said, it's great to fail. And Marcelo, said it's great. And, be okay, embrace failure. I agree with that. But it is work. And you already have enough work on your plate. So this is where I would absolutely not. I would say don't do constantly leveling up the adventure. I had a group that said to me, we don't want to start Tomb of Annihilation at first level. We want to be, I think initially they wanted to be 5th. And I was like, how about 3rd? And what I said to them is like, I'm totally cool if we start at 3rd, but I'm not going to constantly up this adventure. So it's going to be easy at first. And that's totally fine. You guys will be stronger than the surrounding initial world, and then you'll eventually catch up. But even then, I ended up adding a lot of kind of neat, fun things, extra quests, extra story stuff. I built up a whole pirate thing. And so they were, on paper, they should have been way higher level. And they kept on saying to me, when are we going to level? And I'm like, no time soon. And it was just sort of a joke. And would they have liked to level more? Yes.
Possibly.
Did I want to take on that work? No. I wanted to put my work in the places that are going to be pleasing to me. And sometimes your campaign just has some give and take, right? And that was my give and take, was you're not going to level beyond the adventure. I'm not going to up level everything. So that's just the way it is. And they, they're fine. They had a great time. They probably would have said they would have liked to have been higher level, but it's the compromise we struck. I would not embrace, unless you love, taking apart monsters or building encounters and dealing with that math, I would not at all up level the adventure. I would just have them progress more slowly initially because of that. And like others said,
if you've got a group that wants to Adventures League or that wants to level up fast, run the Adventures League stories, because then the stories level up with the game, with the
every time you play, gain a level kind of thing. But one thing also is that we tend to want to do everything that's in a book because it is awesome. But the reality is there's nothing wrong with a short campaign. Then you can immediately go run another one. The world will not run out of campaigns, and a campaign is never too short in my experience. I've never had too short a campaign. Short and sweet works fine. Even though there may be really lots and lots of great quests, doing lots of great quests can still get a little old versus moving quickly. So there's nothing wrong with cutting out the number of quests they do, even though it may feel that way.
And Teos, on that note, when you have a compartmented product like that, not saying you can't just dive back in and revisit it, later on.
Sure.
It works out perfectly when you have a product that is built with maybe not with that in mind, but initially.
Yeah, and your point about sort of moving things around is a good one. You can take some of the bad creatures in chapter 2 and make them part of a chapter 1 quest, right? So you can sort of borrow pieces from one and throw it into the other. You don't have to do it use it in a particular chapter if they're higher level.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming on and lending us your expertise on this topic. It was great, and thank you for taking the time to answer Tom's question. And thank you, Tom, for asking. We appreciate you listening.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you to all our listeners out there and to our patrons. And so let's go around the horn here. Tim, where can people find you on social media or follow your work?
So all my social media is at the GM Tim, TheGMTIM. You can find me streaming on Norse Foundry's Twitch channel. Do Star Trek adventures every two weeks. You two both have to come play. Marcello, you got to come play. I just had Fred Love play. It was awesome. It was so good. Anyways, and my adventures are on DM's Guild at the GM Tim. Come say hi.
Awesome. All right. And Marcello.
When I'm on the interwebs, you can find me on Twitter at Valiant573. When I'm twitching, I'm doing so at DEmerald573. And if you like a little bit of Discord in your life, Marvello844 is my sign. I do have work out there too, like you all alluded to on the DM's Guild. If you're looking for low-level new beginnings for your adventuring parties, I certainly would welcome you taking a look at anything I've put together. Thanks.
Excellent. How about you, Teos?
You can find me at AlphaStream on the Twitters, and my blog is alphastream.org. I've already written this week, so I'm very excited to post it soon. And yeah. How about you, Shawn?
How about me? I am on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or you can find me on the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. If you're a patron, you can use the Slack room for life from Misdirected Mark to talk to us like Tom did. If you want to follow the podcast on Twitter, it's at MasteringDND.
Shawn, do you mean that all of your life will be now run through Slack?
Pretty much. You would be surprised how much of my life is run through Slack. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised how much of my life
Use
is
Slack for life. That's
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Slacker.
Mm-hmm. Mastering Dungeons is a Misdirected Mark production. So, gentlemen, what should we do now that we're done talking about Icewind Dale?
Go kill some owlbears.
Or get ready to go to Candle.
Oh, yeah.
Candlekeep. Ooh.
Good call.
Let's go put our hand on a Ouija board.
Spelljammer confirmed.
Bye-bye.